Hey everyone, welcome to Encounters USA. If it's aliens, UFOs, Bigfoot, or Dogmen you're looking for, you came to the right place. Now listen up as we listen to some of the latest encounters. Hello, everyone, and welcome to your latest encounters on Encounters USA. Today, we are continuing our search for encounters in hotspots in the USA, and today our subject is the Hudson Valley in New York State. Now, today I have a very special person I brought back, and I brought back Tony from our last podcast, and I just want to talk to you a little bit about Tony. In the last podcast, we interviewed him about his encounter in near Mount Shasta back in 2012. And I was just so impressed with Tony, and he started telling me that he's been researching Bigfoot encounters, and he was just so, I guess I would say, moved and influenced by his encounter that I asked him, Tony, would you please come back and do the podcast for a few episodes? And Tony was very enthusiastic, and he's back. And I would just like to welcome back Tony Zaccolini. Tony, welcome back to Encounters USA.
Thank you, Matt.
Yeah, Tony, we're going to try to make you a regular as much as possible because you are in Bigfoot territory. And I think we're going to kind of, as much as we can get you on the podcast, we're going to try to keep you as our Bigfoot expert. And so if you have any encounters that you'd like to send in, well, I think Tony's probably going to end up reading them for us. So Tony also collects his own stories, and Tony is very knowledgeable about the subject of not only Bigfoot, but Mount Shasta and UFOs in the region. So it's just great to have Tony on the podcast. So Tony, today we're going to be talking about the Hudson Valley. We're going to be talking about, of course, sometimes we do a Dogman thing, and sometimes we do a Bigfoot thing, and sometimes we do a UFO thing. But what we're going to do today is we're going to start, I don't know how many podcasts this is going to take. I'm thinking 3, and I think we're going to get Diet. We're going to get a remote viewer on Tuesday of next week. So I think we might have her finish up by remote viewing some of the places we talk about. But today we're going to start off, we're just going to go in a sequential order. We're going to start talking about the Dogmen, and then we're going to start talking about Bigfoot, and then we're going to start talking about the biggest topic is the high incidence of UFOs in the Hudson Valley. So I would just like to start off by, Tony, you've got a story about a Bigfoot encounter, that's right?
Yes.
Okay, so I think we're going to go ahead and I'm going to talk a little bit about, if you're watching on the YouTube channel of this podcast, you're going to be able to watch and see the maps we're going to be talking about. If you are listening to the podcast, you can look at a map later. But right now, what I'm looking at is a map of Dogman encounters in New York State. And if you, I will have this on the podcast. And Tony, I don't know if you have this map or not, but the reason that we're doing podcasts or doing the Dogman first is because in New York State there's not that many Dogman encounters. Ironically, there are actually 2 in New York City itself, but there are not that many Dogman encounters. And the one Dogman encounter that I have, I'm just going to go ahead and read it to you. And so listen, and this is from not too long ago. I want to look at the date. I'm going to have the link in the description. But this is the story. The headline is Witness Report, Attacked by Dogmen in New York. This is the story. I saw you on Finding Bigfoot, and I know you like investigating weird stuff, so I thought about you when something weird happened to me last week. Me and two friends decided to go camping in New York up on and redacted mountain. There was a dirt road that runs right down the mountains, and then off of it are a lot of smaller off-road tracks that have some good camping spots. I don't know if you're really supposed to be camping there or not, but there's a lot of fire pits, so people do it anyway. Anyway, we set up our tent and got a fire going, had a couple beers, and are complaining about our women, and the sun goes down. We all looked at each other because the woods got real quiet. You couldn't even hear crickets. Everything just went dead quiet. It felt like there was a lightning storm coming because you could feel the static in the air, and all the hair on the back of my neck stood up. Jamie started saying that he felt like the air was humming. And then all of a sudden, there was a real deep bass noise and this bright light in the distance that flashed up and lit up the whole woods. It looked like the light when a real big firework explodes for the first few seconds, but it lasted for probably a minute before it split up into 3 or 4 other lights and shot back down into the trees. We could see all the lights glowing out in the woods, and then there was a big gust of wind, and it was gone. Everything smelled like it had just rained, but it never did. We didn't know what to do, but figured we would just wait it out. But nothing happened. We thought maybe it could have been a meteor or something, so we left it alone and went back to complaining about our women. At about 2 a.m, we decided to turn in, so Jamie and I went to sleep in the tent. But Dan said he was going to sleep by the fire. An hour later, I wake up because Dan is in the tent shaking us, saying that there is something big watching the camp. He said it was about 50 feet from the fire, and he thought that it might be a bear, but that it was standing on 2 legs and bobbing back and forth like it was trying to get a better look at him. While he was talking, we heard a loud scream. I've never heard anything like it before as long as I've been alive. It sounded like a pig being slaughtered, but deeper and so loud it made your ears ring. Next thing I remember was hearing 3 or 4 more things come running toward the campsite, and the embers from the fire kicking up and landing on the tent. The things or creatures or whatever they were kept running up to the tent and grunting and running back into the woods. Every once in a while, one of them would scream again and pull on one of the tent poles, dragging the whole tent a foot or two. The tent was collapsing on one side, and we didn't know what else to do, so we just started screaming as loud as we could. Only took a minute, and then everything was quiet again, so we made a run for the truck as fast as we could hit the gas. When we were leaving, we saw one of those things in the headlights standing in the road. I told Jamie to gun it, and the thing straightened up and puffed its chest. It must have been 8 feet tall, had dark gray hair all over its body except the front. That hair was white or yellow around the chest. Its face looked like kind of a dog, but not really. I know what Bigfoot looks like, and this was way different. I didn't even move when we drove at it. It didn't even move when we drove at it. We had to swerve around it, or we would have run right over it. We drove back down the mountain to the highway, parked the truck in a gas company parking lot. We were going to tell the cops what happened, but we didn't know if we were camping somewhere we shouldn't be, and we had been drinking all night and couldn't afford a DWI. So we just waited for the sun to come up and sobered up. When we drove back up to get our stuff, there wasn't anything there. Everything was gone. No tent, no cooler, nothing. All right, Tony, well, there's a little bit left of that story, but it's pretty incredible for the people in New York, eh?
Mm-hmm. Very interesting.
Have you had any encounters in Dogman encounters down in California?
No.
Never heard any of that. Okay. All right. So there's we've talked a little bit about the Dogman, and this was a nice story to lead into. because when we're talking about hotspots, which we are, and we've already covered Mount Baker, or Mount Shasta, which is how I met you. We've covered. We started with Egypt. We started with the pyramids in Egypt, and the Hudson Valley is our third hotspot. So, because there's just not that many sightings in the Hudson Valley, I didn't want to spend too much time on it, but I want people to understand. I didn't want to spend too much time on the Dogman, but I want people to understand what we mean by a hotspot. And I've seen like the UFO hunters. They've done a show on this is with Dr. Bill Burns, and they've done a hotspot show, and we're going to talk a little bit about that when we talk about the UFOs. But they have certain prerequisites. And theirs had something to do with ley lines, military bases, and high incidence of UFO activities. I'm going to leave the military bases out because you can't find very many places in the United States that don't have a military base close by. But what I do want to talk about as far as the Hudson Valley hotspots are the ley lines, and that they are definitely prevalent, except that the maps are the ones that I look at, and I'm going to post some of these on the YouTube channel. Some of these are a little bit different. Tony, have you done any studies with ley lines? Not at all. Okay, because I don't really know that much about them. All that I know about them is that they are confluences of energy that is created from within inside the Earth, and probably has something to do with the magnetic field that the Earth creates. But beyond that, I don't know. So the only thing that I'm looking for are certain things that occur in a hotspot to call it a hotspot. And the three things that we look at in Encounters USA, the Dogman, the Bigfoot, and UFOs, are definitely in the Hudson Valley. And I just wanted people to understand that, yes, even though we're not going to spend a lot of time on the Dogman in the Hudson Valley, there is a Dogman presence there. So, Tony, you've got a Bigfoot encounter. Do you want to go ahead and read that now, or you want to introduce it? Tell us what's going on, or?
Well, this took place going to upstate New York, about 30 minutes from Hudson Valley, and it took place 2 years ago. It was sent in by an anonymous person. She was driving with her dad, mom, and niece. They were stuck in traffic. Sorry, my notes are. So this encounter happened 2 years ago. My mom, dad, niece, and myself were heading upstate to visit family. We were in my dad's car with me and my mom in the back seat, and my niece riding shotgun while my dad drove. We were stuck in traffic caused by a minor fender bender. My mom, who had no knowledge of Bigfoot at all, looked out the window to her left and says, "Hey, look, a monkey is looking at us." No one paid attention, but about 30 seconds later, as we were crawling along with the traffic, I said, "What do you mean, a monkey?" She then says a big monkey was standing on the side of the throughway next to a tree looking at the traffic, and then looked at us. I then began to question her about the details, and after a few minutes I was convinced it was a Bigfoot. She said it had long brown hair with a man's face and was very tall. She also said it was looking left to right at the traffic when their eyes met briefly. I remember telling my dad to pull over because I wanted to run back and get a picture of it with my cell phone, but he refused to. That's it.
Okay, so I didn't hear the word. Did you get a location for that?
It did not give an exact location. It said about 30 minutes from the Hudson Valley.
Okay.
Upstate.
Okay. Yeah, so let's. I'm gonna. If you're watching on the podcast or on the YouTube channel, I am gonna flash a map right now of Bigfoot sightings in the Hudson Valley, and we're gonna start talking. I have a Bigfoot encounter here too that I want to read to you. I just have to find it very quickly. Oh, and it's not going to show it to me. I'm just going to go ahead and find it. So, as I'm looking for it, I just want to. Here it is. I just want to talk a little bit about the Hudson Valley and why it is important. Now, historically, like back in the Revolutionary times, the Hudson Valley was the key to the colonies because if you could split the Hudson Valley, which the British tried to do, you basically split Boston from New York. And you also split the population that was back in the Hudson Valley from New York, and so their dependency upon each other would have been split. So the Hudson Valley was all the way back at the beginning, or the foundation of the country was very important. And so when we start talking about the Hudson Valley, it's not only been important for like strategic reasons, but it's also been important for like spiritual reasons. There have been a lot of religious awakenings up near Palmyra, not in the Hudson Valley, but the Mormon Church founder Joseph Smith supposedly had an encounter that inspired him to start the Mormon Church. So all of these things happened spiritually. I want to say dogmanally. You've got your Bigfoot. You got so much stuff going on there, and then you also have what people think are remnants of possibly Viking settlements that are up in the Adirondacks. So the Hudson Valley is just an amazing place, and you could like we're going to probably do 3 podcasts on this because there's so much information. But if you look at it on the map, it goes right. If you look at New York City, it goes and basically splits New York almost in half. And so everything along there has, you've got your granite formations, you've got your mountains, you've got your backwoods, you've got every element that you need to have like your Bigfoot, your Dogmen, and your UFOs. So let me go ahead and let me read the story about the Sasquatch sighting in the Hudson Valley. And this happened, I think, back in 1968. And this is her first encounter. She just gotten her tent up and was settling in for a solo campout one night when the weirdness hit. It was just getting dark, and I heard an owl call, really loud and sudden. A little different sounding, she said. Seconds later, there was the most horrible scream. It just tore through me and vibrated my chest. It was unlike anything she'd ever heard before. I sat there in shock for a minute, just shaking, and decided I had to make a run for it, she remembers. I bolted straight down that 75% grade, slipping and sliding, and ran into the house crying, yelling that there was something out there and it was after me. Just don't go up there anymore, she was told. But there was no keeping her indoors, and in time, BD took over the hook, line, and sinker bait shop, and she never forgot the sound. And then it just goes on to say that she watched Finding Bigfoot, and then she remembered that sound. And also, I had it happened here in Washington, but a friend of mine was working in the woods up here, and she heard that sound on TV, and she says, "Oh, I've heard that sound before too." So that was funny. So Tony, just an aside, have you ever heard one of these Bigfoot screams?
Not in person, but
I'm sure you've talked to people that have, and we're definitely going to be talking about that. So, all right. So on our Sasquatch sightings map, which is going to be for the benefit of our YouTube audience, We have a list of sightings for Bigfoot, and basically Dogman a few, Bigfoot definitely some, but then we get into UFOs. So I think that I know that Tony, you're a younger guy, but have you ever heard of Whitley Strieber?
No.
All right. Well, I'm going to give you the background on it. Actually, I'm not. I'm going to actually ask you for two people because we're going to start talking about them. Have you heard of J. Allen Hynek?
No.
Okay, so let's start with J. Allen Hynek. You've heard of Project Blue Book?
Sounds familiar.
Well, in the 1950s, the Air Force decided they had to act like they were doing something about UFOs, so they started a few projects, which culminated in Project Blue Book. And Project Blue Book was headed by a couple guys, and then J. Allen Hynek, who was definitely a credible scientist. He took the program over, but the Air Force wanted him to discount everything he found, right? But being a credible scientist, he went through and he found that there were a lot of things that he definitely could discount. But there were about 20%, he said, that there were just no explanations for. And so the head of the Air Force's UFO project, Project Blue Book, and he was the head of it for like 10 years. He wrote a book about it, and the book is, let me just find an open space here. The book is, and if you're watching on the YouTube channel, you'll see the cover of the book. It's called Night Siege, the Hudson Valley UFO Sightings. So the head of Project Blue Book, who the Air Force got to discount these sightings, wrote a book about the sightings. So what does that tell you about the Hudson Valley? So the next person we're going to talk about is Whitley Strieber. And Whitley Strieber does a show. I think he does Coast to Coast sometimes. He hosts it. But Whitley Strieber wrote the book Communion. And Communion is about his abductions from his cabin in the Hudson Valley. So he was in the 80s. He claimed to be abducted and wrote a book about it. And he talked about his communion with these aliens, hence the title. But during that time, that was when they had what they call a UFO flap. So are you familiar with that phrase?
No.
UFO flap? A UFO flap is basically when there's a lot. It's when a lot of things are going on. They're getting a lot of witnesses and a lot of calls to the police. So they call it a UFO flap. So if I can just check out my notes here very quickly. Now, we talked a little bit, I think before we go too far into the UFO thing, because we're going to also be talking about, we're going to go out to Sedona, Arizona. I'm sorry if I'm saying that wrong. But one thing that we need to kind of clear up here, because this is something that is discussed when you talk about ley lines and UFOs, is that are they charging their batteries somehow on these ley lines? And people talk about Stonehenge and places where they have ley lines where there's a lot of UFO activity. So people say Sedona is part of that. And if you look at the granite structure of the Hudson Valley, then that, and the fact that it is a confluence of ley lines, which our YouTube viewers will see on the map, it is at the confluence of two ley lines. So I guess you would have extra energy there. So we have the head of the Project Blue Book writing a book about the Hudson Valley UFO flap, and Whitley Strieber, a famous author, documenting his experiences there. So there are a number of accounts, and I'm just going to give you a little bit about what Dr. Hynek wrote in his book. And this is just from Amazon, and I'll put a link to the book at the bottom of this, and also I'll put a link to Communion in the description. But this is why Dr. Hynek thought that the Hudson Valley was so important to write a book about it. He says that there were 7,000 7,000 sightings in this flap time. There were witnesses from all walks of life. The reports from strangers corroborated what other people saw. There was a huge object that hovers and floats through the sky almost silently. There were encounters with entities who looked like they had gray skin or were reptilian. And there was physical evidence that something strange took place. So based on these things, Dr. Hynek felt that it was important to write this book about the Hudson Valley. So I think that's very interesting, and I think I have one more. Dogman encounter, or not Dogman, I'm sorry, one more Sasquatch encounter. And no, I don't see it. So if we look at, I'm just going to show this map on the YouTube channel. And if you look at this UFO sightings map, and this is put out by Metrocosm, the majority of sightings of UFOs are definitely in the Hudson Valley in the New York State. So, Tony, I've been talking for some time now, so I'm going to start picking your brain. You're sitting there so nicely. So tell me, you are kind of an expert on Bigfoot, and you've had some experience with UFOs at Mount Shasta. So can you kind of tell me what your opinion is about a possible connection between the two?
In my opinion, I've heard a lot of encounters and stories about flashing lights and Bigfoot appearing and all over Mount Shasta, but in my opinion, I believe they're more human than alien-like. Okay.
So you think they're more, there's not so much mystery to them, that this is something that can actually be explained without a UFO connection?
Yes.
Okay. What about that Dogman encounter? Did you find that a little strange?
I found that very strange, especially all their stuff being missing the next day.
Yeah. So, Tony, do you, so you haven't heard anything about Dogmen out there. Have you had a chance to look into any Dogmen stuff? Not necessarily here, but have you had a chance to look into any of the Dogman mystery?
Yeah, not that much, but I find it interesting, and I do sometimes look at encounters and stories around the country.
Okay. Yeah, because I find it very fascinating. I'm not so sure, and that's why I started this channel. I'm not so sure that there isn't a connection with the Bigfoot and the Dogman. And so I guess this is a good time to add this, is that if you have an encounter that you would like to talk about, if it's a Dogman, a Bigfoot, or a UFO, or alien, we would sure like to hear about it. So please contact us at encountersusa1@gmail.com, or just go to encountersusa.com, our website. So, all right, let's just reiterate then that on a hotspot, we have, at least as far as we're concerned, we're looking for three types of activity, and that is UFOs, Bigfoot, and possibly the Dogman. But also, there has to be an element of ley lines, and I think that all of those elements are there. So what I think we're going to do is we're going to, on Tuesday, I think we're going to have Diet come on, and I'm going to have for remote view some spots where Dogmen or Bigfoot have appeared, and we'll see what she comes up with for them. So if you are watching the podcast on YouTube, I'm going to have all of the maps and everything for each entity or whatever posted as we talk about them. So you'll be able to see these maps. And then I'll also have links in the descriptions to all the articles that we are citing. So, Tony, well, let's talk about the next podcast. I think where do you want to go? You want to go to Sedona, or you want to go up to my neck of the woods, the Northwest?
Northwest.
Do you? What's your attraction to the Northwest?
Personally, I think the trees and the forests and the thick redwoods and whatever the hell can be out there.
Yeah,
it's very interesting to me.
Yeah. Have you done any investigating lately? Have you got any more Bigfoot stories?
Not lately, no.
Okay. You want to tell us? Do you have any good ones you want to tell us?
I'd have to look through all my reports.
Okay. So, Tony, let's just ask about the research you're doing. And also, we had talked earlier, you're talking about publishing a book, right?
Yes.
That is so exciting. So, yeah, you kind of have to, I know that from what I see, you kind of have to guard your information. So that's probably very important. And I'm sure that based on where you live and the kind of contacts you're able to make, I'm sure you've got some really fascinating encounters.
Yes.
So, Tony, you've done a lot of investigation into Bigfoot, right?
Yes.
Do you think we talked earlier, or the first time that we talked about possibly that there's an element of predation going on, that they're feeding, right?
Yes.
Do you think that there are circumstances that we are creating, that like deleting the game in a certain area that causes them to do that? Or, and I'm just asking for an opinion, or do you think that they will just eat anything, like a bear or something?
I think it honestly just depends on the Sasquatch. I've heard reports of friendly and observative, and some that are just crazy and attack, and some that are territorial, and some are just hungry.
So you think that in some cases that they are just trying to get something to eat, in other cases they're just trying to chase people off?
Yes.
So let me ask you this then. You live in California, I assume?
Yes.
In some secret, like a bat cave in California, right? So, because I don't want to give your location because you might have all these girls chasing you down or something. So we've got to keep your location secret. But do you think that the building and just tearing up the forest like we're doing, how much effect do you think this is having on these creatures?
I think it's having a lot, and I have heard reports from loggers and stuff around here of them being attacked for cutting down trees and just doing their job. So I think it's definitely making them very upset that their home's being torn down.
Wow. So that loggers are actually being attacked?
Yes.
Wow, amazing. Because when I was studying and listening to these accounts up in New York and down there and here in Washington, it's all the same story. It's all, well, we're just tearing up their habitat so fast. And so, I mean, they're just like any thinking being or kind of thinking being. The first thing you want to do is get rid of that threat. Mm-hmm. So yeah. And it also because one of the things that we're trying to look at here, and as we get encounters, we're trying to compile data on like behavioral characteristics, size, the types of creatures of whatever they are, and find a location for them. But the fact that they are not just running away, but they're demonstrating defensive behavior. Mm-hmm. That has to, a bear is not going to exhibit defensive behavior except like to another bear. He's going to attack something, not for the territory, but probably mostly because it's food or it's territory, then it's food. But in the case of the Sasquatch, and because we're still kind of talking about the Hudson Valley, where they're just tearing that place up, and doing so much development there. And every time you hear the story, oh well, we got this nice piece of property, and we're out in the woods. Oh, and then we got attacked by these critters. So it's funny, but it also when you started talking about, I was listening to the Patterson and Bob Gimels. Can't remember his last name. I'm sorry. Yeah. But Gimli, I think. But Gimlin. Okay. But when he started talking about what these things were doing, I mean, they seem to know that the oil for the bulldozers, they seem to know if they got through that oil down into a valley, that bulldozer wouldn't run. So why would they do that? Why would they think it's so important to get rid of that? So I think that they are demonstrating like almost human intelligence. So yeah, it's a big mystery, and we're definitely going to keep looking at it. So I think that I think we'll call that a podcast for today, Tony. I'm going to do a podcast tomorrow. I saw the Bob Lazar movie. Have you seen that yet?
No.
Okay, you know who Bob Lazar is?
No.
Okay. I'm just going to stop asking you. All right. So Bob Lazar was this guy who came in. He worked at Area 51. You know Area 51?
Yes.
Okay. So he worked at Area 51, and then he quit, and he was a whistleblower. And he said, I saw 9 spaceships. I know he worked on the propulsion system. He talked about a element 115 or 115. And so had this incredible story to tell. And so, and he checked out in everything. But to this day, people are still hung up on if he was even credible or not. Mm-hmm. And everything that he said has been verified. They verified he worked there. They showed that he was in the paper for he built a jet car or a jet bike or something. And he was in the like not Area 51, but the JPL, Jet Propulsion Laboratory. He worked for them. They said he didn't work for them. So all these people denied him working for them. And so there was always this controversy. So people didn't pay attention to what he said. It was always about, so there's a couple things that I'm going to talk about on the podcast. The first thing is Bob Lazar found UFOs. That is the most important thing. And that's what he's trying to tell everybody. But they were able to muddy the water so much. And all they have to do is, like a defense attorney, they just have to make you question the witness. And then the witness is no good. So that's what they did to poor Bob Lazar. And there are some things that I would like to talk about on the podcast I'm going to do tomorrow. I know it's not in our hotspot. It's not in our hotspot theme, but I would like to talk about it. And Area 51 kind of is a hotspot because the UFO factor. But I'm going to do the podcast tomorrow, and you're welcome to join me if you like. So that is the plan for tomorrow. And then next week, I'm going to go out. You might find this interesting. There was a policeman that was over, I don't know if you know about our geography that much, but over on our peninsula in the Olympic Mountains, and he had a couple of Bigfoot encounters. So he's going to take me, and he's going to show me where his Bigfoot encounters took place. So it's going to be super. So we're going to do that on Thursday, and so we won't be doing an actual podcast from it. I'm just going to post the videos from it.
Awesome.
So it's going to be an exciting time.
This sounds awesome. I can't wait.
All right. So are you going to join us tomorrow then?
Yes.
Tony, for the yeah, take a look at it. I think it costs you $5 on Amazon. I'm not going to reimburse you for it, but yeah, if you want to, or maybe it might be on YouTube too. But anyway, it's pretty interesting and pretty sad when you start to look at human nature. But anyway, so we will look at that tomorrow. And I just have to look at my notes before we close. Tony, do you have anything else to add to our...
No.
So I will just go ahead and say thanks again, Tony, for being on the podcast, and for everybody else. We really hope that you enjoyed the podcast. If you would like to comment, please do so on YouTube and iTunes in the comment section. Also, if you like our content, please subscribe on YouTube and on iTunes. Now, the last thing I have to tell you is, remember, if you're out in the woods this summer, always watch your back. Thanks for listening to tonight's show. Please remember, if you've had an encounter, we want to hear about it. Go ahead and email us at encountersusa1@gmail.com or contact us at encountersusa.com, our website, and go to the contact form. All right, everybody. Until next time, be careful out there. And if you're out in the woods, watch your back.